For 6 months now, Algeria has been rocked by protests in which those taking part have called for a complete overhaul of the country's leadership. And yet, despite the resignation of the longtime president Abdelaziz Bouteflika back in April, the protest movement persists. Well, on this, the 27th consecutive Friday of protests, let's speak to Amina Afaf Chaieb, who is the spokesperson for the Ibtykar movement here in Paris. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Ibtykar is a pro-democracy movement which supports the protests in Algeria and organises parallel protests here in Paris. What do you think has been achieved during these last 6 months?
Well, the biggest achievement is that Algerians, as citizens, as sovereign people, have rediscovered their ability to have a weight on policy and on politics. In the past 6 months, not only did Bouteflika resign, but there were two elections that have been suspended. There were oligarchs and political figures that have been put in prison, and also the regime has fractured from within. That just shows that we are in a historical dynamic towards change, and we are not going to settle for a change of facade. We want the refoundation of a democratic Algeria.
Okay, and clearly lots still needs to be done. I mean, what do you see as being the key roadblocks to achieving what you'd like to see done?
Well, currently we are in a political impasse and a constitutional void. And this is because the power struggle between the regime and the popular movement is still going on. We have the citizens, the Democrats, who want the rule of law, who want democratic institutions, who want the separation of powers, the respect of freedoms. And this can only be achieved by a thorough and serious transition phase that sets the foundations for these ambitious transformations and necessary transformations. But then on the other hand, the regime wants to maintain the status quo. And one of the biggest obstacles is that the military has stepped in the political arena, and it has gained a lot of prominence and has been fighting this dynamic of change. For example, they think and they propose as a solution presidential elections in themselves. And it's like going back 6 months back in time and still proposing the same thing. And at the same time, in the name of a dialogue, they are fighting dialogue. Ahmed Gaid Saleh, the military chief of staff, has explicitly and strongly refused any prerequisites to elections, meaning that he does not want to discuss or talk about any topic that would question the legitimacy or the survival of the actual regime.
Yeah, and I just want to ask you, I mean, I've been seeing, every week now for the last 6 months, so protests in Algeria on the Friday, and then on the Sunday, I've been walking past Place de la République most days on Sundays, seeing a large crowd of the overseas Algerian community and people who feel strongly about what's happening in Algeria. What do you think has been the effect of that sort of show of solidarity from people here in Paris to the protesters back home in Algeria, do you think?
I think it brought all Algerians together. That Algeria, because of the civil war that happened in the 90s, because of the catastrophic economic conditions that have been a consequence of a corrupt regime, there are a lot of Algerians and very qualified Algerians that have left their country. But we all remain citizens, no matter the geography. And what is currently happening in Algeria has brought all Algerians together in the same fight.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed for that. Amina Afaf Chaieb, a spokesperson for the Ibtykar movement. Thank you very much for speaking to France 24.